Alright guys, it's Mike. I'm starting a tutorial up for UVing, and I want to go over some basic concepts associated with UVing before getting right into it, because I think it needs a little bit of more gradual explanation. So if we go into here, into this file, we have a cube and a cylinder, right? And basically, the goal of our UVing, like I said, is to get all that into 2 dimensions, right? You'll be able to see that in the UV editor. We can get that all in 2 dimensions and then placed on our final texture. Like imagine this is our texture space, right? Like this is where our nice clouds and patterns and whatever you're going to color the object with is going to be on there. So you could do that by just like imagine if this was a cardboard box, right? You got your nice new I don't know, TV from Amazon or something. You have a huge box. You could just smash that by stomping on it, and then it's in your texture space now. And if we go over to your UVs and you're like, oh man, I can't really color this, because if I color this, it's just going to be 1 dimension of that. Like we didn't even get these sides anymore; they're completely gone. What we kind of got to do is, and I'm going to do this in 3D. Like this isn't the way you UV, but let's be clear for explanation's sake. Like if I go into here and I'm going to delete this before I like completely butcher this cube. I'm going to use some other tools you haven't seen yet. Where is it? Face extract. There we go. So this bit, extract, you don't need to know this yet, but extract kind of just takes a face in an object and removes it. Like you don't need to do this step, but this is just to help you guys visualize. So we're taking all of those faces, right? And now they're different objects. And the goal of the UVing practice is to kind of start unfolding those, right? It's called UV unfolding. It's called UV unwrapping. And we kind of just go in here and unfold all those faces, right? We have our nice mesh. Combine these. Let me go back in here. I'm just going to keep unfolding that. Let me move these. More. So that's how you would unfold that box shape, right? Your box from Amazon, like it's got all of its sides still, right? Like nothing's compressed, but it's now splayed out, and you could lay that into. Oh, let me combine this again. Mesh combine. Combine. There you go. Make sure that's one piece. Yeah. You can scale that down and then fit that onto your UV map, right? And then this is what Photoshop takes a picture, or what Maya takes a picture of, and then you send it over to Photoshop. So that's basically what we have to do with this object, right? Now, the way we do that is by, instead of actually cutting up the faces itself, like we have to keep it all one object. We can't just completely butcher this object. We have to instead cut along its different edges to create that effect, and then unfold them like you saw me like rotating that. But that'll be done in our UV editor. So if you pop open your UV editor over here, just right at the top. You'll be able to see it. And another thing to do is go into Display Polygons and do Texture Border Edges. So this is going to make it very clear where our texture, like where we made those cuts, like in here. Like if you look, all of those edges are thick because they're technically separated objects. But in here, if I go into edge mode and I select those edges, because remember we folded out from that, like this is our bottom panel right there. It's that one. So in order to get that shape, we're going to need to cut along these edges. Along all of those. And we're going to leave this one together because that'll make that tail right there. So and if we go into cut and sew, we can just click cut. You'll see that those edges became thicker and white as well. In older versions of Maya, they're still green, but they're like thicker. But they'll change based on what selection mode you're in. Like instead of like now that we're in edge mode, it's like blue and white instead of green and white. That was just because I was in object mode. But so now we have those edges cut, right? And you'll see that this is going to produce a similar effect when we unfold it. And so how you go about unfolding or unwrapping, if you look online and you see someone talking about unwrapping, they're talking about this process, not other stuff. We can go into modify and unfold. And I was having that problem in class where I clicked that unfold button and it gave me really weird results. And I found out it's because if you go to Windows, because if you're at home and you do this and then you see unfold, if you click this button and it gives you strange results, or if you try to click this unfold tool and well, there we go. There we go. We have a fatal error in Maya. I'm glad I captured this for the class. I'm going to stop the video and get us back to where we need to be. Oh, all right. This we might be able to salvage it though, because it's not over. See, Maya's like attempting to save in user blah 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 app data blah 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 blah, and in this file extension. So sometimes if you press OK instead of just closing out, it does actually save the file, but a lot of times it doesn't. I hope it does, because then it'd be helpful to show you guys what goes on. The file's being saved. That's somewhat hopeful. It did show that the file is being saved. I'm not going to submit an error report because I'm sure they get thousands of those. If you want to be a good Samaritan, though, then you can go for that. So I'm going to open up Maya 2019 again. Man, I can't believe we got a nice crash on the tutorial video. Classic Maya. Classic Maya. Yeah, I was telling you guys that it's more stable on PC, but clearly. Okay, all right. So Maya crashed during last session. Please click the following button to retrieve saved file. So I'm going to open that up. That's cool. That's like a new that's a new thing. Okay, so I'm going to close that panel so it doesn't take up half of my screen. And look, man, wow. Maya, you're impressing me. So I'm going to immediately save as. I'll go to my desktop just because that's where I keep my course materials for you guys. I'm going to rename this as UV Concepts. Let's do Recovered. Because it's back from the dead. Maya was able to save it. So that's kind of that doesn't happen very often, but like sometimes Maya comes in clutch like that and saves you a bunch of time. So in the unfold options, you remember I was saying the unfold tool. If you click that, Last time when I clicked that, it crashed, so I'm not going to click that this time. But if it throws up an error that's like cannot find UV 3D procedure, then it's because we don't have a plugin, which I suspect is what was going on in class, and that's why I was getting like an older algorithm that's a lot shittier for unfolding an object. And so if you open up your plugin manager, you'll see all your plugins in here. If you scroll down to unfold 3D, if it's throwing up errors and it looks like this, then click loaded and click auto load. So the next time you open up Maya, it auto loads that. And I'm just gonna click refresh to make sure it's up to date. And there we go. So now we have access to Maya's unfold 3D algorithm, which is super good. And you'll go into the options and you can see, if you click that little box, it goes into options. You have legacy settings, which is what I was using in class, and it does just a garbage job at everything. It's like it's the worst unfolding UV algorithm ever. So we don't use that. We use unfold 3D. And apply, and you'll see that we have that cross shape, which is exactly what we ended up with there. So I hope that helps visualize it, right? So now we go into a cylinder, and my UVs end up looking like this, but your UVs might look like something different, you know? So I'm gonna go into, if you just make a cylinder, I'm gonna go in and create a fresh set of UVs for you guys, and you can do that through either UV and then going with planar mapping, all cylindrical mapping. Like I'll just preview like what that does. Like cylindrical mapping, you can see it kind of trying to map this cylinder out, but it's still not that great because it's not getting the tops and the bottoms. But that's fine. So the thing to keep in mind when you're creating these first UVs is that it's kind of like scanning your object, right? Like if you put it on a photocopier and it kind of just scans straight through. So if I click planar, you'll see that it comes up with this plane. And this plane is basically our scanner. So if I expand that frame, you see that's going to shrink it on that same dimension, you know. If I expand this way, it's going to shrink it on that dimension. But we want it to fit most, pretty much right in that square, because it is pretty square shaped. Like that's yeah, it's pretty much a square. So we want it to fill that shape, you know. But I want you guys to think of this as a cube, right? Like we unfolded one already. So like, how would you unfold this? So I'm gonna go duplicate this again, right? Now this is since we're working in 3D, this is not how you actually make the UVs, right? Like, I'm gonna go click these, and then I'm gonna hold Shift and then period, and that expands your selection. That's a really useful tool. I'll go over that more during the modeling your character course, but yeah, that's a really useful tool. I'm just gonna go to mesh or edit mesh, and I'm gonna do that same extract operation. So now you'll see we have a different, like this would be a separate UV chunk, right? I'm gonna do the same to the bottom. Now keep in mind, this is only for demonstration purposes. When you're working with UVs, you're working in UV space, but this is just to help visualize the actual process. So then I'm going to go into Edit Mesh and Extract. So you're going to end up with a few different, since I extracted it, moved my pivot point to the origin. That's fine, doesn't really matter. You're going to have this, and it's like, well, how do I modify center pivot? How do I really like get that down into UV space? Like, if you look, and then we made a texture on there, it would just be like that one pixel that's going around the ring, you know. because when it's reading that texture, it's just putting it onto that map. So you could be like, well, I might choose to expand this out. I'm going to go into soft select mode by pressing B and holding middle mouse click to do this type of thing, and then put it down right there. But then you'll notice that it's way stretched, like these edges right here get way stretched out compared to these bottom edges, right? Because we didn't move those bottom edges all, we kind of just stretched that out. So what you actually need to do is in your UV map, you're going to be, I'm going to do this with a 3D tool because I'm just doing a 3D preview. You would make a cut along one of your edges, and so you'd have that cut available now. So you'll see that it has that same thick edge, right? And then you kind of go in and start. I'm going to delete these edges just for ease of moving around, because it's going to be kind of wacky. If you start moving these edges, dun -dun. Again, this is just for visualization purposes. So like the algorithm, when you start unfolding it, is going to start just slowly kind of unwrapping it like this. And like that's what the algorithm is doing, and then we're slowly getting that ironed out into a go into B mode again for ease of working with a lot of verts. I'm just going to keep moving these around until it looks pretty much unfolded. So you see how it takes that wrapped around cylinder and unwraps it. Like imagine it's like a piece of candy, like a Tootsie Roll or something that has that wrapping paper on it, and imagine that wrapping paper being your mesh, or like a Christmas present being your mesh, and then you take that in and kind of divide it up and then unwrap it, right? So there you go. That's how that sphere is going to unwrap, and then let's see what that actually looks like when we're doing it for real in UV space. So if your UVs don't look like this, and you're wanting to do a sphere alongside with me, or it's not a sphere, a cylinder, my bad. Just go into planar, and it's going to make a planar projection of that. Alternatively, you can go up here and go into UV planar projection, and I like this because then you can get some little options. So I'm going to go from the z-axis. So I'm going to apply that, and you have your fresh UVs ready to be messed with. I'm going to turn off soft select mode with B. So I'm going to double click these edge loops on the top and bottom, and I'm going to cut and cut. So now if you go into and hold right click, you can go to UV shell mode, remember that, and then move this stuff around, and you'll see that's that same setup. Like we cut off those tops, and in our actual sphere model we have those tops cut off from that piece. And remember how we cut along one of those sides? Well, now we do the same in here. So basically when you're unwrapping something, you have to keep in mind how best to unwrap it. Just break it down into these familiar shapes like a square or a sphere, not a sphere, a cylinder. And because I'm about to unwrap a shirt for you guys, and if you think about it, a shirt is kind of just a cylinder that has two cylinders attached to it, right? So when we go about that, we're gonna be, it'll be pretty clear on how those cylinders match up to it. So yeah, I always think it's good to start with identifying where your cuts are going to need to be made. And so I'm going to go into UV shell now that we made that cut along there, and I'm going to unfold, modify, unfold. If you get wacky results, go back into that plugin manager, make sure you have that loaded. And you'll notice it made a nice version of that all flattened out for us. I'm going to go select my two other shells. Yeah, these are UV shells, islands, whatever you want to call them. They have a few different. Hey guys, sorry about that. I had a little bit of a recording error. But yeah, so we unfolded the side of our cylinder, and then now we have the top and the bottom caps of our cylinder, right? And those need to be folded out as well. If you look at our shapes, that's the part that we just unfolded, this side cap. And then we have the two caps, and of course this would be rotated to be upright, but it's just a small detail. But so these, we need to unfold them. But if you click unfold, then you'll notice that Maya just kind of warps it out of existence, and that's because I think the unfold algorithm has problems with shapes that are just completely flat like this, like in our UV space, because this is a bunch of UVs, right? But when we planar projected it, it's just like all messed up and bunched together. So what we need to do instead, there's a few ways that we can solve this problem. I'll walk you through all of them right now. You can unfold along, and unfold along means that it's just gonna take your model. It's in that legacy, like the older algorithm, the way of unfolding, where you unfold in one direction, either vertically or horizontally. U and V mean, like, U is horizontal, V being vertical, because if you look at this graph, this is called U and this is called V. So if you just select it, set it on vertical mode, right? Because this is completely horizontal right now. If you unfold along it, you'll see that it snaps into exactly what we needed. So, but I'm going to undo that. What you can also do with your projection, now that this is this has that complete ring around it, I can go into UV shell and select all those faces again. We can just create new UVs in planar mode. Now if I planar mode, since we still have the planar axis set to Z, it's just going to still be projecting from that side, you see right there. That's what the camera's seeing when it projects like that. But we don't need that. Like, what we're looking for is from the top, right? And top, remember, up and down is Y, so if you project straight down, I'm going to have to reselect my shell. Alternatively, you could go in here and select UV shell. I'm going to go into create planar, and that way we can get the little dialog box, like the little options that pop up. And here we can change the axis. So I can set it to Y. And there you go. It's straight up perfect like that because, again, the camera is projecting from that downward angle. And one last way to fix this with using the regular Unfold 3D settings is by, like, this will show you why Unfold is like not good at this flat, super flat stuff. Because if I just change it to here, like if I rotate my camera even like a slight bit right here to where you can barely see it, and just set it to camera, Then apply, you'll see that it grabs my camera view, right? And you'll see that square was set up exactly with the direction of the camera. And it captures that. And then now unfold will work, you see. Because it just has a hard time dealing with those super flat objects, and it just folds it in on itself. But if you have even the slightest bit of like actual dimension to it, then it unfolds it nicely. But I'm just going to go back and planar project from Y. And so now we have all of our shells, right? And our job now is to lay these shells out into that UV space, the 0 to 1 space. And I'll show you in Maya 2017. It's a lot clearer. I don't know why they did this for 2017 only, but this is what the UV editor looks like in that. Let me expand that. And it's really nice because it has that like gray highlighted square. It's like, hey, you need to end up here. And I really wish they had that in 2019. I'm sure they probably have some sort of like setting to enable that. Let me see. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, unfortunately. So that kind of sucks. But I wish they did have that though, because that was super helpful. Ooh, wait a minute. Man, that's a shame. That's a shame. So we have our UVs right here. And now you're like, okay, to get this into square, I know what to do. I got to select all my shells, and then with R, I can just scale it right down. And then move this here. Also, important to know, J enables snapping on this. If you hold J, I'm going to be releasing a PDF with nice hotkeys for that, so you can. So that'll be one of the ones in there, but for now you'll be like, ah, yes, they're laid out exactly what we need. They're all fitting in the square. But notice how much empty space we have. Like this is very inefficient for a UV map, because like we have all these empty spots in that square. We're only looking at this 0 to 1 value, right? And so you're like, ah, man, how are we gonna make that better? Because if I scale this up, it's just gonna go off that square, you know. And like if we brought this over to Photoshop as is, when you paint, you're gonna be missing out on a bunch of detail, because like all these pixels in Photoshop aren't gonna be read by the object, you know. So what we have to do is split this cylinder up more, unfortunately. When you're doing your characters, you probably won't need to do this, because characters are more complex and will have a lot of UVs, and you'll want to keep these seams to a minimum. But on these small basic shapes, you run into a problem a lot of like running out of space. So what we want to do is you can go into cut and sew, cut right there, or cut right here, and that just cuts right along the middle of that. You can go into UV shell mode, and then, oh, I seem to have cut a little bit too close, so I'm going to Control Z until I don't see this thick border anymore. There we go. So I'm going to, whoops. There we go. So I'm going to double click the one right under it and cut it, because that was the true halfway point. We go to UV shell. I'm going to place that right next to it. And here's the Tetris problem that you're going to need to, when you start laying these out, try to scale them up and find something that works best. I'm going to keep these aligned like that, just to optimize that space, right? So I'm going to scale this down again. that's probably the best we're gonna get. Unfortunately, we can optimize it a little bit more. Not too much, because you don't want these to leak off the sides, right? Because then that's not going to be colored. I mean, it will be colored, but it won't be the right color. Because when you leak stuff off the sides, it starts poking into this side as well. So imagine it being over here as well. So it would get colored effectively by whatever part is touching this. So we want to keep that within the square, you know. I'm going to move these over. Move this over. And there we go. So that's probably the best we're going to get for that. And then so that's how you lay out a single sphere and a single cube. Oh, let's adjust these as well. So these are going to need to get scaled down. And cubes are super awful at optimizing UV space like this. As you can see, it's like, well, we could cut them up into individual squares further. And lay them out this way, and this would be a little bit more efficient. Oh man, but still, as you can see, like as I'm trying to like place this puzzle around, it's still pretty unfortunate that it's so square. Yeah, that's pretty much the best you're gonna get out of a square. But that won't be much of a problem when you guys are working on your actual models, because they'll be much more detailed, and they'll have a lot more of these UV islands, these UV shells, these different UV chunks, like whatever you want to call them. Like they'll have a lot of them, so you're going to have a lot more. You're going to be utilizing a lot more space just by virtue of having a more complex object. But yeah, so that's pretty much the concepts for UV mapping. Getting those UVs down. I'm going to show you my approach to a shirt that I modeled. You can find the tutorial for that model on linked to on Beachboard, and as well as just on my YouTube. So check that out if you want to see my approach to that shirt. It's pretty nice. There's a few tools that I didn't have time to go over in class that are on that instead. But I'm going to move over on to that next. So that'll be the next video. All right, see you later.